UFC 303. Could have been one of the greatest cards of all time, with the return of the Mac, Conor McGregor, but instead, after his foot injury, it's just an average UFC card. Even with that little bit of a disappointment, I'm still going to run through it and make my predictions on every fight on the main card, and it should still be a pretty exciting night of fights. Now, before I start my predictions, I want to run through the last pay-per-view real quick, 302. I predicted 4 of the 5 main card fights correctly. The only one I got wrong was the main event between Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev, which it's actually kind of funny. I've gotten Poirier's last 2 fights wrong. Kind of unfortunate. But all in all, that brings my total to 9-6 over 3 different cards, which, I mean, if that was a fighter's record, he's not winning a title anytime soon. But it's not terrible. I mean, it's above 500. That's all I can ask for. But enough of that. Let's get into the fights. First off, we've got Michael Venom Page taking on Ian Gary. Now, this one's shaping up to be a pretty exciting fight. Both of these guys are really good strikers. There's a lot of bad blood between them. And it'll probably end up being a stand-up fight the whole time, which is a lot more exciting than the ones where there's just a lot of wrestling. MVP is pretty unorthodox, and even though it's only his second fight in the UFC, he's kind of on the fast track toward fighting for the welterweight belt. Ian Gary, on the other hand, I mean, he's a pretty good striker. He's got pretty good leg kicks, too. I mean, he's not going to knock anyone out with them, but he can just kind of wear them down. He's still undefeated, so MVP's looking to finish his undefeated streak. But for the winner, I'm going to pick MVP, Michael Page. I just like his unorthodox techniques better. You know, I think he can catch Ian Gary off guard at some point, and I think he's going to get a finish victory. Up next, we've got a women's fight. Mayra Bueno Silva taking on Macy Chiasson, however you say it. MBS is a really good submission fighter, jiu-jitsu gal. She lost her last fight, which was a title shot against Raquel Pennington at UFC 297. She's a pretty good fighter. You know, I mean, there's a reason she got a title fight. Chiasson, on the other side, is pretty well-rounded, another good submission fighter, but has a little bit more of a stand-up game as well. This is probably the fight I'm looking forward to the least, and I think most people would agree with me here. You know, I'm kind of expecting a snoozer, but, you know, maybe I'll be surprised and it'll be exciting. But I'm going to pick Mayra Bueno Silva. I think she's just straight up better, and I think she can do it by submission. In the third fight, we've got Anthony Smith taking on Roman Dolidze in the light heavyweight division. Now, this fight was originally set to be Jamal Hill taking on Khalil Rountree, but then Rountree pulled out and was replaced by Carlos Ulberg. Then Jamal Hill pulled out and was replaced by Anthony Smith. And then Ulberg pulled out and was replaced by Dolidze. So, it's been a long road to get here. And this one, I mean, it should be a good fight. Anthony Smith is pretty well-rounded. I would almost say he's like a gatekeeper in the division. He's been good, but he's never been good enough to really have a genuine title shot. I mean, he lost to John Jones, but I mean, so does everybody. And Dolidze is moving up from middleweight. Even though he lost his last 2 fights, he's a pretty good striker. I mean, he's kind of average on the ground, but you can get away with that sometimes. But I think he's just better than Anthony Smith. The thing I think Smith could use to his advantage is his big size advantage. Dolidze is moving up, so Smith has, you know, a natural 20 pounds on him. I believe he's a couple inches taller as well. But even with that, I think Dolidze can probably win a decision here. In the co-main event, we've got Brian Ortega taking on Diego Lopez. This is another one of these old guard versus the young bucks. Very similar to Dustin Poirier against Benoit Saint-Denis. Going through both these guys. Ortega's a little bit older. I mean, he's not that old yet. He's still in his prime, but he's kind of inactive as well. I mean, he keeps getting hurt, but he's had like 5 fights in the last 6 years or something like that. Eventually, that's going to catch up to him, and he's going to lose one of these big ones. But, I mean, he keeps hanging around. He's coming off a win against Yair Rodriguez. He's one of the best submission guys ever in the featherweight division. amazing jiu-jitsu on the ground. And then Lopez on the other side is a little bit more well-rounded. He's got some big KO power, but he's no slouch on the ground either. He's only had 4 UFC fights, but he's 3-1 with 3 first-round finishes, including his last 2 by knockout. So he's pretty fucking good. In the end, I think Ortega can get it done. I would imagine Lopez looks pretty good with the stand-up game. Probably gets a big knockdown or something, and then Ortega can kind of just pull one out on the ground, just survive the ground and pound, and transition into a choke and kind of steal a win here at the end. Now in the main event, we've got a rematch of the UFC 294 main event. Jiri Prochazka taking on the light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira. Everyone knows about these guys, but in case you don't, I'll run through them pretty quick. Pereira is just an amazing striker. He's got great leg kicks, great counters. He's got a really good chin too. I mean, the guy beat Adesanya, so, he's pretty good. You gotta give him his credit. Jiri, on the other hand, he's also really good. Another great chin. His biggest strength is honestly his unpredictability. I think he can just catch people off guard all the time. And I think that should be pretty good for him in this fight. I think one of the things Pereira has against him this time is the fact that he doesn't have a full camp. When you're facing someone as wild as Jiri Prochazka, a full camp can be really helpful in terms of preparing for these almost random attacks he's throwing at him. In the last fight, Alex ended up catching Jiri with I think it was a counter hook. And, it was a little bit of a questionable stoppage. It seemed a little bit early, but I don't know. Jiri looked good before he got caught. And in this one, I think he can pull it out. I don't see this one going the distance. So I'm going to pick Jiri by knockout here. And we'll see if my trend of picking against Alex Pereira continues. He proved me wrong last time. I thought Jamal Hill was going to do enough to beat him, but, that was a big mistake. But, yeah, give me Jiri Prochazka and new light heavyweight champion.